Newcastle United fans must be jumping with joy because the Premier League have certainly got their work cut out with this. So Manchester City have won their legal battle against the ATP rules. And what does this mean for Newcastle United? We're going to be breaking it down. We're going to be looking at what ATP is and how Newcastle can move forward as a club. But let's start by discussing what ATP is. Well, it was set up in 2021 off the back of Newcastle United's takeover. Why was this done? Well, this is a joke in itself, but pretty much the Premier League's cartel were worried about Newcastle using their own business relationships to inject money in the squad, to therefore grow the club, invest more heavily in the transfer market, and really compete at the top end of the Premier League for trophies, Champions League places. And the Premier League's cartel threatened to leave the Premier League if this was allowed to happen. So the rule was pretty much brought in to stop Newcastle investing in their own club, which is absolutely shambolic when you just think about it in isolation. Why wouldn't you want a competitive league? But this is a Premier League we're talking about. And ironically, the ironic thing about this, one of the big Cartel 6, one of the biggest members, certainly in the past decade when it comes to trophies and how they built their squad, is Manchester City. These rules impact Manchester City heavily because they like to use their own business relationships outside of football to invest in football, to then bring in more revenue, to then go and spend more heavily in the transfer market and build a better squad. Manchester City took 2 deals to the Premier League in terms of investments and sponsorships from their business relationships, or because let's be honest, these billionaires have got taps into lots of different businesses. They want to use those businesses to invest in the club, to grow the club. That's what it's all about. And the 2 sponsorships that Manchester City took to the Premier League were rejected because they were too high. So the Premier League wanted them to lower this revenue, therefore decrease the amount of income Manchester City were receiving. So Manchester City weren't happy about that, so they fought against it, took Premier League to court and won the case. Now, this is not just about Manchester City and Newcastle United. There are many Premier League clubs that have been impacted by this. Aston Villa being one because they can't invest, but especially Everton and Nottingham Forest. Now, these are big ramifications for the Premier League because there are numerous clubs that can sue and look for compensation from the Premier League. And I think the Premier League are lucky that when Everton and Forest got a points deduction that they weren't relegated, because that would have been significant ramifications. So they're quite lucky in that aspect. So what's it mean for Newcastle United? Well, I've already explained what happened in terms of Manchester City's 2 cases that got rejected. Newcastle also had one that got rejected. They themselves brought a sponsorship deal with Seller to the Premier League. Now, the Premier League found it too heavily invested in and deemed it as a personal business relationship. So it was a sponsorship that could have been in excess of £50 million reportedly, that just got over the line for £25 million. So that's half of what we should have got. So that would have brought in more revenue and allowed Newcastle United to spend more in the transfer market. But instead, because of that, this is just one example, and there is far more examples out there. Newcastle United had to sell Yankuba Minter, Elliot Anderson, just to comply with PSR rules. Had we been allowed these sponsorship deals and these sponsorship deals being accepted, we probably wouldn't have had to sell these 2 players. So we could probably sue the Premier League just for that alone. But we've missed out on big revenue deals, which would strengthen our case in the transfer market, allow us to spend more money and also grow the club. So in simplistic terms, it's absolutely joke of a rule because it's preventing clubs from showing ambition. And for that reason, Newcastle United can rightfully sue the Premier League because it's prevented revenue, which resulted them being limited in the transfer market, which again has affected their ambitions and success. And just think, right, the higher you finish in the league, the more money you bring in, and that's more revenue, again, to go on the books. So it's impacted our league positions, probably results, because we haven't been able to strengthen the squad. So it's all got a knock-on effect on so many things. Newcastle, what I would do, if I was sitting in Newcastle United's board now, I would be collecting every bit of evidence, proof that we've lost out on revenue. So even deals that we didn't get over the line, that we could have got over the line, that had been rejected from the Premier League, Newcastle could go in heavily on the Premier League because it's made a massive impact on moving the club forward. And the patience Newcastle United have shown during this period, it's quite clever. Newcastle United have not invested in their squad in 3 transfer windows, and I actually think there's a reason why. Because of this situation, I think secretly they knew that Manchester City going to take the Premier League to court. So Newcastle just sat back and said, the less we invest, the stronger argument we have. So the fact that we haven't went out and bought players, we can say, well, we targeted this player, but because of PSR rules and the revenue were brought in, we weren't able to get the deal done. We targeted this player, but we weren't able to get the deal done. Mark Gahey, they wanted 70 million. We could only offer 60 million because we don't have the revenue, because you blocked the revenue to really push for that transfer. So they can use these examples. And other examples, like we haven't got a sponsor for the training ground, that's just one example. We can say, I think this is quite clever because they could have got a sponsor. And I think they could have got a sponsor quite easily, but it probably wasn't the sponsor they wanted. And had they known that the Man City were taking the Premier League to court, and they probably knew Man City were going to win this case, they didn't want a sponsor, because now they can look back and say, we missed out on all this revenue because you wouldn't let us get the sponsor we wanted. So what's happened over these years under these new APT rules, it's been a massive disadvantage to Newcastle United and other teams in the Premier League. It's made the Premier League less competitive. So Newcastle have really got a strong case should they decide to take the Premier League to court. Now, it will probably be settled outside of court in a negotiation. So the Premier League will probably say something like, we'll give you more leeway in the next couple of years for the PSR rules, because we know PSR rules are going to be in place for next year. So they might give them more leeway in the transfer market or anything like that. It will probably be settled outside of court. But if I'm Newcastle United, I'm absolutely looking to take the Premier League to court, because this has impacted us massively, even for player contracts. We're looking to re-sign player on another contract on higher wages. We couldn't because we didn't have the revenue coming in. So they can use a shitload of examples. So it's going to be interesting to see how it comes out. Now, what should Newcastle do moving forward, or at this point? For me, I would sit and wait, because the Premier League are looking to set a APT2, which Man City are going to take them to court for again. So, but that's still in the works. So there's not much Newcastle United can do in terms of sponsorship. So the best idea is probably sitting waiting to see what happens. But what I would be doing in the meantime is just open up negotiations to different sponsors. When APT2 disappears, we've got those sponsors in place ready to come in. So that's what I would be doing. But we must be careful, remember, because the UEFA rules for sponsorships are different to the Premier League rules. So it's not like we can go out there and be careless and pump in 300 million with a sponsorship. We need to be clever in what we do, because we still need to comply with the UEFA rules. Barca failed to comply with UEFA rules, and their fine was minimal in comparison to football terms. So even if we did not comply with UEFA rules, the fine would be minimal, but we don't want that. But in a nutshell, that's what it means for Newcastle United. It looks like we've got a strong case, and Premier League will be sweating on this. They'll be absolutely sweating on this, because Man City have already won. Just strengthens our case, because we're in the same boat as Manchester City. We're in the same boat. So just collect all the evidence. This is obviously if they want to take them to court. We're not previewed any information that Newcastle United want to set up, but this is looking good for Newcastle United moving forward. Hope that's all made sense here. And if it has, make sure you drop a like, drop a comment, and also subscribe on your way out. But I will be doing a transfer window news very shortly, so stay tuned for that. But until next time, thank you very much for watching. Up the mags, and I'm sure we're going to have a very exciting summer in the transfer market. See you later, guys.